Some people keep secrets in diaries. My father-in-law kept his offshore bank accounts. For years, I looked the other way. I told myself it was for my family, for peace, for the life we had built. I was a man who had built a career on finding the truth in numbers, yet I chose to live a lie by ignoring the one staring me in the face. But when my wife, Elena, tried to use my children as leverage, when she and her powerful family decided I was expendable, that lie became a weapon, and I decided to arm it. The day her lawyer served me papers was the day I stopped being the husband they underestimated and started being the forensic accountant they should have feared. This isn't just my story. It's a reminder that sometimes the quietest people in the room are the most dangerous when pushed. If you've ever felt cornered, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, then you understand why I had to do what I did. Stay with me. This is the story of how I fought back. The moment Arthur Vance walked into my office, I knew the charade was over. His smile was a scalpel, sharp and sterile, meant to dissect my life with surgical precision. He represented the Thorns, one of the most influential families in the state. And now, he represents my wife. "Lucas," he said, his voice smooth as polished marble, "I wish this were under better circumstances." He placed a thick stack of documents on my desk, the paper crisp and official. "Elena is filing for divorce." I didn't speak. I just looked at him, my hands resting flat on my desk. My office, a space I'd built for focus and analysis, had suddenly become a courtroom. He cleared his throat, mistaking my silence for shock. "The terms are straightforward. Elena retains full custody of Sophie and Liam. She gets the primary residence, the vacation property, and a 70% stake in your auditing firm, Bennett Solutions." He leaned forward, his eyes cold. "The children are adjusting to the idea. Elena has explained that your dedication to your work has often left them feeling like a secondary priority. They understand this is for the best." There it was, the first move in their game. They weren't just taking my assets, they were rewriting my history, turning my late nights, providing for my family, into a narrative of neglect. A cold fury began to crystallize inside me, not into rage, but into a sharp, diamond-hard focus. I looked past Arthur, out my window at the city skyline. I thought of the thousands of data points, the countless hours I'd spent tracing patterns and anomalies for clients. I had tracked money launderers, exposed embezzlers, and unraveled corporate fraud. And I had missed the conspiracy brewing in my own home. I slowly opened the top drawer of my desk. Arthur's smug expression didn't change. He expected me to reach for a pen. Instead, my fingers closed around a thick, sealed manila envelope. I had prepared it that morning, a gut feeling I'd learned never to ignore. I placed the envelope on the desk between us. It made a soft, definitive thud. "Give this to Elena," I said, my voice eerily calm, devoid of the emotion he was so eagerly anticipating. Arthur's smile faltered. "What is this? A counter-proposal?" "No," I replied, holding his gaze. "It's a reality check. Tell her the numbers inside don't lie, unlike everyone else in her family. We all have a breaking point. A moment when we decide the silence is more costly than the fight. If you've ever had to make that choice, you know the weight I felt in that moment. Remember to subscribe. Our stories are what connect us." 2 months before Arthur Vance condescended to grace my office, I was just a man trying to notice the details everyone else missed. It was, after all, what I was trained to do. My name is Lucas Bennett. I'm 44 years old, and for 15 years, I was a forensic accountant, first for the federal government, then running my own firm. I specialized in finding the stories that numbers try to hide. But at home, I had stopped investigating. Home was my sanctuary, or so I thought. The first crack wasn't a quake. It was a hairline fracture. A receipt for a hotel stay in Napa, tucked in the pocket of Elena's suitcase after a weekend she claimed was spent consoling her college friend in Lake Tahoe. The date was the same, a simple, explainable mistake, perhaps. But in my world, coincidences are just patterns waiting to be decoded. Then came the changes in behavior. The new password on her tablet. The hushed phone calls that ended the moment I walked into the room. The way she'd flinch when I touched her shoulder, as if my hand were a brand. One night, exhausted after a long case, I was helping my son, Liam, with his math homework on his laptop. A notification popped up from a fantasy strategy game our whole family used to play together, Kings and Castles. It was from Mark, my business partner, and I had thought, my friend. Can't wait for our strategy session tomorrow, my queen. The crown will be ours. A silly, game-related message, but the knot in my stomach tightened. My queen had been his joking nickname for Elena for years. I hadn't known they still played. That night, while the house slept, I did the one thing I promised myself I would never do. I used my skills on my own family. I knew their login patterns, their security questions. I accessed the Kings and Castles server and pulled the message logs between their accounts. They weren't just playing a game. They were using the private guild chat as their own encrypted messaging service. The messages were a devastating tapestry of betrayal. He has no idea. He thinks I'm his brother. We have to be careful. Lucas notices everything. He notices everything at work. At home, he's blind. My father has the plan ready. We just need to be patient. My blood ran cold. My father, Robert Thorne. Elena's father, the patriarch. This wasn't just an affair. It was a conspiracy. The final message I read that night was from Elena, sent just days before. I can't do this double life much longer. Let's just take what's ours and end this. The children will understand in time. Dad will make sure of it. I leaned back from the screen, the hum of the computer, the only sound in the dark office. They weren't just in love, they were in business. And I was the liability they were preparing to write off. But to do that, they'd need my father-in-law's help and his money. Robert Thorne didn't just have a silver spoon in his mouth. He owned the mine. A real estate magnate and political donor, he moved through the world with the unshakable confidence of a man who had never been told no. He believed that money was a tool to build empires or bury problems. I had always been a problem he tolerated for his daughter's sake. Now, it seemed he was ready to bury me. If Mark and Elena were the actors, Robert was the director. And to understand the play, I had to follow the money. I called in a favor from an old contact at the Treasury Department, accessing databases of shell corporations and offshore entities that were far beyond public record. I started with my own company, Bennett Solutions. I began tracing every payment, every invoice, every client. It took 3 weeks of late-night analysis, but I found it. A series of substantial strategic consultancy payments approved by Mark to a company called Apex Holdings Group. The work described was vague: market analysis, client acquisition strategy. The amounts were anything but. Over 18 months, nearly $500,000 had been funneled to Apex. Apex Holdings was a ghost. Its listed address was a P.O. box in Delaware. Its directors were other shell companies. But I followed the chain through a labyrinth of Cayman Islands registrations and Swiss bank accounts. The ultimate beneficiary was a trust, and the name listed as the trust's advisor was Robert Thorne's most trusted and most discreet attorney. Mark was siphoning money from our company, my company, and funneling it to my father-in-law. But this was small time. $500,000 was a rounding error for Robert Thorne. This was a test, a pilot program. The real operation was much, much larger. I cross-referenced Apex Holdings with Robert's public projects. I found it in the Northwood Community Revitalization Project, a grand plan backed by a $20 million municipal grant to build affordable housing and a new community center. It had been announced with great fanfare 2 years ago. The groundbreaking was perpetually 6 months away. I dug into the grant disbursements. The $20 million had been paid out in full to a construction firm, Thorpe Construction, which had immediately subcontracted 90% of the work to, you guessed it, Apex Holdings. Apex had then invoiced for materials and pre-construction site management to the tune of $18.5 million. The project had never broken ground. The money was gone. It was a massive fraud, a theft from the city's taxpayers. The final piece fell into place when I was going through an old photo archive for a family birthday video. I found a picture from a charity golf tournament a year ago. There was Robert Thorne, his arm around a beaming man. The city comptroller, David Rossi, the man who had authorized the $20 million Northwood grant. The photo was time-stamped 2 weeks before the grant was officially approved. They weren't just stealing from me, they were stealing from the city. And my signature was on audit reports for other legitimate Thorne projects, giving the entire empire a veneer of financial credibility I never knew I was providing. Discovering that the people you shared your life with see you as a tool to be used and discarded changes you. It makes you question every memory, every smile. If this pain feels familiar, you're not alone. Share your strength in the comments below. The $20 million was the smoke. I needed the fire. A digital ledger was one thing, but I needed something physical, something undeniable that connected Robert, the comptroller, and the money. I needed a witness. I found him in the last place I expected. My daughter Sophie's history project. She was doing a report on local heroes, and she had chosen a man named Gabriel Petrova, a former city engineer who had tried to expose corruption years ago but was discredited and fired. His story was a sad, small article in the local paper's online archive, Gabriel Petrova. The name rang a distant bell. He was the whistleblower mentioned in a footnote of the Northwood Grant documentation, the one officially dismissed for mental instability and unreliable record-keeping. I found him living in a small, run-down apartment on the outskirts of the city. He was a broken man, aged by disappointment. He was wary when I introduced myself, but when I mentioned the Northwood Project, a fire ignited in his eyes. I knew someone would come eventually, he said, his voice raspy. They took everything from me, my job, my reputation. He told me everything. How he had discovered the inflated cost reports and the fake subcontractors. How he had taken his concerns to David Rossi, the comptroller, only to be told to drop it. How he had then gone to the press, but the story was killed after Robert Thorne's lawyers threatened the newspaper. The next day, he was fired. They thought they had it all, Gabriel said, pulling a small, encrypted hard drive from a locked box. But I'm an engineer. I believe in backups. On that drive was the Petrova ledger. It was a meticulous, handwritten, then scanned record of every kickback, every fake invoice, every wire transfer. It had coded entries, RT for Robert Thorne, DR for David Rossi, MB for Mark Benson. The amounts, the dates, the bank routing numbers, it was all there. It was a thing of terrible beauty. The entire conspiracy laid bare in stark, undeniable detail. I scrolled to the most recent entries. There were regular, smaller payments to MB, his payoff for siphoning money from my firm. Then my eyes froze on the final entry. It was dated the exact month Elena had filed for divorce. A single, massive payment of $500,000 from an RT account to a legal firm. The memo line read, Project Divestiture, L. Bennett. My breath caught in my throat. They weren't just planning to take my company. They were planning to use my company, hollowed out and under their control, as a clean vehicle for their dirty money. The divorce, the custody battle, it was all the first step in their laundry cycle. They were going to erase me and use my life's work to wash their crimes. Now, I have the receipt. The first call came from Robert himself. The old lion. His roar was gone, replaced by the wary growl of a cornered animal. It was 3 hours after Arthur Vance would have delivered my envelope. Lucas, his voice was tight, controlled. What is the meaning of this fantasy? It's not a fantasy, Robert, I replied, my voice calm. I was in my home office, and the Petrova ledger opened on my screen. It's a balance sheet, and your column is about to have a very, very bad day. There was a long silence. I could almost hear him recalculating, trying to find a new angle of attack. What do you want? He finally asked. The words dragged out of him. I want 3 things, I said, my tone clipped and deliberate. 1. Elena withdraws the divorce petition immediately and signs full, uncontested custody of Sophie and Liam over to me. 2. Mark sells his share of Bennett Solutions back to me for $1. And 3. You and Comptroller Rossi hold a press conference confessing to the Northwood fraud and repay the $20 million with interest to the city. He laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. You're insane. I'll destroy you. You can't, I said simply. The ledger is real. The wire transfers are real. I have copies with the federal prosecutor's office, the state attorney general, and 3 investigative journalists. They're on a timed release. If I don't deactivate it in 24 hours, it goes to all of them. Your choice, Robert. A controlled demolition or a nuclear blast. I hung up. The next call was from Elena. She was hysterical, sobbing. Lucas, how could you? My father is having a heart attack. You're tearing our family apart. Our family was torn apart the moment you and Mark started plotting. I said, my voice cold. You made your choice, Elena. You chose your father's empire over our family. Now live with the consequences. The third development was the most predictable. My contact at the Financial Crimes Unit sent me a brief message. Flagged a Mark Benson trying to board a flight to Buenos Aires with a lot of undeclared cash. Stopped him. Assets frozen pending investigation. He was trying to run, but I was always 2 steps ahead. As he panicked, trapped at the airport, he did what all cowardly partners do. He flipped. My phone buzzed with an email from an anonymous account. I knew it was him. Lucas, it was all Robert's idea. He forced Elena. I have more, much more. Audio recordings of meetings. Get me immunity, and I'll give you everything. The castle walls were crumbling, and the rats were turning on each other. I walked into the final meeting Arthur Vance had demanded, the one where they would supposedly negotiate my surrender. I didn't see a family. I saw a syndicate in collapse. Robert's lawyer slid a single document across the table. This is the custody agreement, he said, his voice hollow. Just sign it. But I knew it was a surrender document for their entire way of life. There is a unique kind of loneliness in standing up for what's right when everyone around you has chosen what's easy. That loneliness can be your greatest strength. If you believe in holding the line, no matter the cost, hit that subscribe button. The conference room smelled of expensive coffee and cheap desperation. Elena sat across from me, her face pale and drawn. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Arthur Vance was there, along with Robert's personal lawyer, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Robert himself was conspicuously absent, no doubt coordinating his legal defense. Elena's pen hovered over the signature line of the custody agreement. Her hand trembled. "Just sign it, Elena," Arthur said softly, his earlier arrogance completely gone. She scribbled her name. Then she signed the business transfer, giving me back 100% of my company. Then the property settlement, leaving her with nothing but her personal belongings. Each signature was a shaky, desperate scrawl. When she finished, she pushed the documents toward me, her eyes finally rising to meet mine. They were filled with a toxic mix of hatred and defeat. "It's done," she whispered. I didn't reach for the papers immediately. I just looked at her. "Before we finish," I said, my voice low but clear in the silent room, "I want you to say it. Why? After 15 years, after our children, why did you do it?" She stared at me, her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Arthur shifted uncomfortably. "Lucas, this is highly irregular," he began. "Why, Elena?" I repeated, cutting him off. Finally, she snapped. "Because you were never enough." She spat, her voice cracking. "You and your numbers, your quiet little life. My father was right. You were a safe bet, a reliable provider. But you lacked ambition. You lacked vision. Mark understood the world. He understood what it takes to be truly powerful." I listened, my face a mask. When she was finished, I gave a slow, deliberate nod. "And yet," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I just took everything you valued. Your children, your home, your safety net." Her face flushed a deep, mortified red. She had no retort. I finally gathered the signed documents, the thick stack of paper that represented my freedom and my children's future. I slipped them into my leather folder. But before I stood, I pulled out one last, smaller envelope and set it gently in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, her voice wary, exhausted. "Consider it a parting gift," I said calmly. "Something Mark wanted you to have." She tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside were photographs. The first was a surveillance shot of Mark at the airport, his face panicked, surrounded by federal agents. The second was a bank statement showing the frantic, last-minute transfer of every last dollar from their joint secret account, an account I had discovered weeks ago, into a new, solo account in the Cayman Islands in his name only. The final photo made her gasp, a choked, strangled sound. It was Mark, taken a week earlier, kissing a woman who was most definitely not Elena. It was his assistant, a woman half his age. They were standing beside a packed car, a roadmap to a new life in his hand. This isn't real," she whispered, but her voice was hollow. the weight of realization crushing the last of her defiance. "It's real," I said evenly. "He drained your escape fund 2 days ago. He wasn't running with you, Elena. He was running from you. Whatever future he promised you, it's gone. Just like everything else." Elena's composure shattered completely. A low, guttural sob escaped her lips. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. The sound was one of pure, unadulterated devastation. Arthur Vance looked away, ashamed and uncomfortable. I simply stood, slid the folder under my arm, and turned toward the door. Without looking back, I said one last thing. "You wanted power. Elena, now you have nothing left to fight for." I left her there, the signed agreements on the table and the weight of her own choices crushing her far more effectively than any words I could have ever spoken. Justice, I've learned, is not a loud event. It's a quiet process, like the tide washing away a poorly built sandcastle. It doesn't happen all at once, but with a patient, inexorable force. The public reckoning came swiftly. Within a week, Robert Thorne and Comptroller David Rossi were indicted on multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. The Petrova ledger was the star witness. Robert's empire, built on a foundation of influence and intimidation, collapsed into a heap of lawsuits and frozen assets. He pled guilty, avoiding a trial, and is now serving a 12-year sentence in a federal prison. Mark, in his desperation to save himself, provided the audio recordings that sealed Robert's fate. He was still convicted for his role in the fraud and for the embezzlement from our company. He received a 5-year sentence. The last I heard, the woman in the photo had long since moved on. I never sent the evidence to the press myself. I gave it all to Gabriel Petrova. He was the one who contacted the journalists. He was the one who held the press conference. His name finally cleared, his dignity restored. Seeing him on television, standing tall for the first time in a decade, was a deeper satisfaction than any revenge against the Thorns. As for Elena, her downfall was quieter, but no less final. The divorce agreement left her with no claim to my assets. Mark's theft of their hidden funds left her penniless. The Thorn fortune was gone, seized by the government. The high society world that had defined her closed its doors overnight. She was forced to sell her jewelry and luxury goods just to afford a small apartment. She took a job as a receptionist at a small real estate firm, a cruel echo of the empire she had helped destroy. People who had once fawned over her now cross the street to avoid her. Occasionally, I hear about her through mutual acquaintances. They say she's polite, even humbled, a ghost of the woman she once was. But for the first time in years, Elena Thorne no longer has any real power to wield. For me, life has shifted. Bennett Solutions is thriving. The notoriety of the case, ironically, brought me clients who valued my integrity and my tenacity. I hired a team of people I trust implicitly, but I don't bury myself in the work anymore. Now, my nights are spent at home, helping Sophie with her math homework, which she's discovered she's actually very good at. Teaching Liam how to throw a curveball in our backyard. Their laughter, bright and unburdened, is a sound I will never take for granted. They don't know the full story, the legal battles, the quiet war I waged in the shadows to protect them. All they know is that their father fought for them, and for now, that is enough. Inside my home office, a single photograph remains on the shelf. It's of Elena, taken years ago on a beach vacation, back when we were still a family. I keep it not out of lingering love or nostalgia, but as a reminder, trust, I have learned, is not something to give away freely. It is something to be earned carefully, protected fiercely, and never, ever taken for granted. Rebuilding a life after it's been shattered takes a courage that's hard to describe. It's a quiet, daily choice to move forward. If you're in the middle of your own rebuild, know that I see you and I'm proud of you. Keep going. If you're watching this, maybe you felt that sting of betrayal, that feeling that the world is unfair and the powerful always win. Maybe you're in the middle of your own fight right now, feeling outgunned and outmaneuvered. I told you this story not to glorify what I did, but to remind you of the power you hold within yourself. For me, it was my skill with numbers. For you, it might be your patience, your integrity, your unwavering love for your family. The system and the people who abuse it count on you to get angry, to act impulsively, to break. Don't choose strategy over rage. Choose truth over noise. Let your character in a moment of crisis be your greatest weapon. My story is proof that even when you feel you have nothing left, you have your mind, your principles, and your will to protect what you love. That fight is what defines us, not the betrayal that started it. If this story reminded you that integrity can still win, if it gave you a little hope for your own battle, then do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel. Share your own story of resilience in the comments below. Let someone else know they aren't fighting alone, because your experience, your strength, might be the beacon of hope someone else desperately needs to see tonight. Thank you for watching. Stay strong